Hey, welcome. It's September 15th. Have not been able to get together over the last month or so. I've had Dr. Windrow and I were sitting here talking. It seems like that there's been lots of different things going on. So it's our pleasure to be able to get back tonight and continue our discussion on really just talking about understanding one another, different viewpoints, and just understanding things inside our community, especially in context with some of the things that are happening in our country. I want to be able to start first by sharing some COVID numbers with you. That's really where a lot of these briefings started. We started back many months ago talking about how we were dealing with the COVID virus, things that were happening inside of our community. But yesterday we had 10,672 positive cases since testing has begun. There were 72,946 cases. And then I think the blessing right now, we only have 504 active cases that are in Rutherford County. There are 8,042 inactive cases. And we've had 80, as of yesterday, we've had 84 deaths. And today, that the active number went down by 20. So we have 484 active cases, and we have 8,092 inactive cases. And we did have one death between yesterday and today. So, our thoughts and prayers continue to go with the families who have lost loved ones. 85 deaths. That's not something that anyone can say that we're happy about, but I do think that it is positive news that we continue to see our numbers go down. We continue to see social distancing taking place, and hopefully this is something that that we're getting a better handle of, and hopefully be able to read several different articles about vaccines and also about a different antidote that had come up. So hopefully, in the next months that'll be something that we will be able to share as well. So tonight, really, we want to be able to answer questions, but one of the things that we really wanted to talk about as we've had this discussion about race and understanding one another better in our community, we wanted to talk about flags and monuments and statues and imagery. And I want to be clear, and Dr. Windrow and I talked about this, that this is not a discussion about removing monuments or those things. When we sat down to start talking about these things, clearly I'm not black. I think you can agree with that. That I want to be able, and as a community, be the type of community that, and we were just discussing this, to be able to sit down and share different viewpoints. And, just like in any family, we're going to agree with some things. We're going to disagree on some things. But, one of the things that you see that I think we all can do better is to be able to understand each other better and also understand someone's viewpoint. So that's where we've come from on this. I don't know if you want to share anything before we start, Dr. Windrow.
Well, Mayor, I want to thank you for hosting this conversation and these conversations. I think they speak to a way of communicating, to a way of sharing ideas and ideals, right? And so even when we do disagree, I don't think it has to come to a point where we have to become disagreeable. And we come from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different parents, different places, right? And yet at the same time, we do have some commonalities. We share certain things, and I would much rather build on those than to allow our differences to divide us. And so again, thank you for doing this. You were the one who suggested it, and I was happy to oblige you. So I'm happy to be. I missed you, man.
No, it's been a month, and are you from here?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're in the minority of people who are from here, and that's one of the things that we talk about. I shared this with someone the other day and this really goes to furthering what our discussion that we're talking about, that you've heard me say this before. When I moved here in 1992, there were 40,000 people who were here. And now, that was just in Murfreesboro. So Rutherford County, I don't even know what the population would have been in Rutherford County in 1992, but Murfreesboro 40,000, and MTSU, there were almost 10,000 students
Wow.
at MTSU in 1992. And now MTSU is closer to 25,000 students, and Murfreesboro is closer to 160,000 people.
Amazing.
And the context with that is that there's a whole lot more people who are not from here than who are from here. And just because that you weren't born and raised here doesn't mean that you don't love this community or you're not vested in this community.
Right.
And that's really where, I wanted to start the discussion to talk about, as you see things that have happened over the last, 4 or 5 months, when you see the discussion on monuments or you see the discussion on flags, I mean, we saw what happened in Mississippi, and I was proud. Kermit Davis, was here in Murfreesboro
Sure.
for 17 years, and when you see him surrounded talking about the Mississippi state flag, I mean, that's a guy from Murfreesboro. That's a guy who really cut his teeth in the city of Murfreesboro. And so I text him and I said, Kermit, wins and losses aside, I couldn't be more proud of you for the way that you represented yourself and you represented your program. So, I mean, as you see those things, what comes to mind?
Well, one, Mayor, and it probably speaks to the different lives in a way that we've led based on our racial background. So what has been happening the last 4 or 5 months has been happening. Right, the discussions about the flag, the discussions about Confederate monuments, the discussions about symbols and imagery, black people have always been talking about that. Now, of course, one, you have to be in that circle or subscribe to that media, those newspapers, those magazines, right? They're not necessarily captured in big time media, right? In what we know as the USA Today, or we know as the New York Times, but those conversations have been ongoing. What does the Confederate flag mean to black people, right? What do those Confederate monuments mean? What is the point of it? What are they trying to convey? What's the message? What's the narrative? Why? And why now? But over the last 5 or 6 months, it has escalated because the national media has paid more attention to it, right?
Right.
For whatever reason. Well, some of it's political. Some of it, I hope to believe, that it's a turning point in these types of conversations, that there is a reckoning. But what we know is, man, you've never been a slave owner, have you?
No.
Checking. You were slow to respond.
No.
I've never been a slave, and
Right.
I've never been a slave owner, right? And so no one I know, whether black, white, or any other color, they haven't owned slaves. And yet there have been some consequences, and there is some residual effect on our society. And so these conversations, I believe, are trying to get down at least to the truth of the matter. And what we know is that the truth has no friends. The truth doesn't choose sides. The truth is simply the truth. And for whatever reason, whether unintentional or intentional or diabolical or wicked in nature, whatever those intentions, the reason why we don't know the truth is interesting, but the fact that we don't know the truth is even more interesting. And so when we talk about historical significance, when we talk about the Civil War and the Confederate States, when we talk about why the Civil War was fought, when we talk about who won the Civil War and who's winning the Civil War now, when we talk about those types of issues, none of us benefit from the lies. All of us, at some point, will benefit from the truth. And I find it interesting that the state of Texas is now treating slavery as a side issue with regards to the Civil War. That's very interesting. So what we have is, and everyone is always talking about revisionist history and people changing history or people undermining history. But again, what has happened has happened. And we can learn from what has happened if we learn from the truth that has happened, and not this Gone with the Wind imagery, not the birth of a nation imagery, not the imagery that makes us comfortable, but rather the truth that provokes us, that provokes our better angels, that provokes us into the type of behavior that the ideals of this nation highlight, that they promote. Right?
I mean, do you think that being where we are in a Civil War town, or where Civil War battles were in the South, do you think that makes that tougher, being, from a historical standpoint? Is that, I'm not a history buff. I mean, my Bible is the history I study, but I mean, does that, I mean, I was in Israel back 2 years ago, and the most seeing those things brought a different life to what I study. But at the same time, going through the Holocaust Museum in Israel and seeing what happened, 100 years ago, not quite 80 years ago, it's unreal and unimaginable. Does it make it tougher being in this area for that discussion to take place?
I would think so, and I think you bring up a great point, and here's why. So I was born, yes, in Murfreesboro. I was born right down the road from Stones River National Battlefield, right? And so I grew up in that area. It's called the cemetery area. And so that cast a shadow over that area, right? And I think it's hard for people born here, or born in Alabama, or born in Mississippi, right? And here's why. Because what we have learned, we've learned from informants who have informed our thinking, right?
Right.
Who have given us this information, and we've believed it, and as a man thinketh, so is he, and so he does. Right? And so when we consider our informants, those people that we have trusted to deliver this instruction or this information, they're professors or teachers or pastors or preachers or parents or the press or peers, when we consider them, especially our parents, the ones who loved us and protected us, we wouldn't dare think that they have told us a lie or taught us a lie or somehow misconstrued the truth. Fact of the matter is, they were told lies too. They were misinformed. And so what we do, we hand down this misinformation as if it's an heirloom from one generation to the next generation. And both races have been ill affected by this misinformation. And so again, I say the truth doesn't have friends. It doesn't choose sides. It just is what it is. And if we could ever get to that is whatever the truth is,
right,
then we'll be better off. Because I believe, and Robert E. Lee himself said that white people suffered the most in slavery. Why would he say such a thing? One, because he had the erroneous thought that it was a fallacy that black people were better off in chains in America than in Africa free. Now that's a white supremacist point of view. So, but it's hard for you if we're dancing.
Yeah.
I'm doing a cha-cha or something.
I don't want to think about that.
No, but think about our feet.
Yeah.
If you are standing on my foot as we dance, I can't go nowhere, but you can't go anywhere either. So the evolution of America and Americans, not from a wealth standpoint, not from a might standpoint, but from a moral standpoint, from an evolution standpoint, how can you evolve? How can you change? How can you become better when you're committed to stopping me from becoming better? So you can't go on because you're standing on my foot, right? And Lyndon Baines Johnson, who actually was in terms of legislation, in terms of putting forth a program for the United States with regards to civil rights, he did a great job. But he said, if you can get a white man, a poor white man, to think that no matter how low he is, the black man is beneath him. You can get anything you want from that poor white man. And so what happens is, in that scenario, no matter how high a black man goes in education or in the economy or how much he owns, in that scenario, he's always beneath the poorest, most uneducated, most disenfranchised white man. Right? And so what does that do? I think it retards the growth of that person, because the mindset says, as long as I got that black man beneath me, at least I'm better than him. But that comes from a narrative that is not true, but it is intentional, right? And so how do we know that, and then how do we grow from that? But which ones of us would ever want to think that our parents or our school system,
Right.
or our culture taught us something as erroneous and as wicked as that? Why would slave owners use the Bible as a tool to keep slaves docile, to keep them passive, to keep them in bondage? Why would someone use the Bible? Because those are the types of things that were used to keep slaves in place.
Right.
So
That's the same, I hate to go back to this, it's the same discussion with, I've really, I say I'm not a history buff, my 8-year-old has gotten absolutely into World War II. And so we study World War II just about every night. And when you look at what happened in Germany with the concentration camps and those things, that was all done in exactly what you're saying, using a context of why that there would be a cleansing with the Jewish people. So, and that's the thing that we've consistently talked about. You can't generationally wait this thing out. It's you say that, okay, it gets better every generation. My kids, it's better with my kids. But in the context of where we are as a country right now, how do we continue? I mean, there's so many. I watched the protest that was on, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks after our May 31st protest. And, I still laugh that when we went through what we went through in 2018 with the group that came in, and I think I shared the picture with you of, the guy who was screaming just some awful things, and he's draped in the Confederate flag, and, I showed you what type of shoes that he had on.
Right. Right.
You remember what shoes he had
Michael
on?
Jordans.
He had Air Jordans on. And I look at that and I just sort of shake my head. But how do we, in the context of where we are right now, how do you have that discussion on imagery or monuments or flags when it is so, I was reading an article before I came in here about the Nathan Bedford Forrest bus that, Governor Lee recommended being moved from the Capitol, and then the Capitol Commission agreed to move that, and now it's saying it's going to have to go to the Building Commission.
Sure, absolutely.
So, how do we have that discussion?
Right. So interestingly enough, I was watching a Leonard Skinner interview, and Leonard Skinner, some of the members are from Alabama, right? And so they were saying why they flew the big flag, the big Dixie flag, and why they have not flown it as much, why it's not as prominent. One, they said they love being Southern, that they love grits, and they still say y'all, and but they do also acknowledge the fact that it is offensive to some of their fans, right? And they never want to be offensive, right? And so that's why they've brought down the prominence. They have decreased the prominence of the flag, right? So it's getting it out there. It's having these types of communications,
Yeah.
right? And so what is it You know, what is it? And not from not necessarily from a black person's perspective or a black American's perspective, but from an American perspective. When you see the flag of a group that rebelled against the nation, when you understand that 10 military bases are named after Confederate generals, some of those Confederate generals who left their post, who resigned their post in the American Army and became generals in the Confederate Army, when you see their names enshrined, memorialized at least 10 military bases, what do you think? How does that make an American feel? How does that make a patriot feel? Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. When you see it for yourself, when you understand that these states, that these people rebelled openly, that they fought against the nation that you are a citizen of, right? How does that make you feel? Do you think that it should be flown from city capitals, right, or state capitals? Do you feel like it should be part of military bases? Do you think we should memorialize rebels, people who were traitors to the American cause? So of course I have some ideas and my own personal views with regards to being a black American, but simply as an American, I that's just so weird that we would revere rebels in such a way.
Well, I think there's two flags that matter in the state of Tennessee. There's this one right here, the American flag, and there's the state of Tennessee flag. And if I'm marching around Murfreesboro with the Murfreesboro City flag, even though we don't have a Murfreesboro City flag, I think you bring up a phenomenal point that ultimately we're Americans, and we all think different, we look different, but I understand the point of what you're saying, that when you see something like that goes back hundreds of years ago, I don't understand, this is not the most political thing to say. Vincent, I'm conservative, but I don't understand the infatuation of something that, clearly people look at and have such an opinion over that. I don't understand that. Can't even come up with the right words to say. But, if I know, and we're not talking about religion, but if I know that I am doing something that is in direct disregard for another person's, I don't want to say well-being, but that makes no sense to me. At the same time, we've talked about some of the protests that are going on and police officers being shot.
Sure.
And we were just talking about this beforehand, that makes no sense either.
It's awful.
Yes. But I think we all have to, as we've talked about this is not it's a heart issue. And,
sure.
And, so when you see the Confederate flag, we've had this discussion. What pops in your mind?
So when I see it as an American, right, as an American citizen, as someone who sees himself as being patriotic, who believes in civic engagement, who believes in the Constitution, who believes in the rights of Americans, who believes in the greatness of America, the imperfect nature of America, yet a great country, right? As an American, I believe that we how can we celebrate those who have committed treason against the nation? I listen to 99.7. It's a conservative talk radio.
I do too.
Now, Phil Valentine, I don't agree with a lot of what he says, and I get it. He has an audience. It's his business. It's how he makes his money, right? I don't know if he agrees with everything he says all the time, and yet that's part of the nature of the business, right? The nature of the beast, really. But he said, you know what? He cares nothing about the Confederate flag. He wished it would be done away with. Why? Because I'm an American. His truth is that he's an American. He's not a Confederate, right? He may live in the South, but he's an American. And anything else besides that should not be celebrated. It should not be revered, right? It should not be saluted. It should not be memorialized with monuments, right? America is for, if America is for truth and right and fairness and equity, right, and justice for all, this is the land of the free, home of the brave, right? And yet, as Americans, we have, I believe, caused so much harm and injury to the memory of those who were killed in a war by not fellow Americans because they left the Union, right?
Right.
But by traitors, because that's what they are. If you think about it, if someone pulled away, if some states pulled away from the United States of America right now and fought against the United States, would they not be traitors to the cause? Would that not be treason? Would they not have betrayed the old glory, the Star-Spangled Banner? I don't know. And so as an American, it befuddles me how America has went about this. And it speaks to the hypocrisy of those who've been in power. The hypocrisy, right?
Right.
The hypocrisy of those who've been in power. And the people of America, particularly the poor people, whether they're black or white or whatever else, the poor people have suffered under this type of leadership that pits people against one another, that panders, right? That speaks to our more base selves instead of trying to lift us up as one America. And it's on it's on all sides. It's Republican, Democratic, it's independent, it's all of that. It's about power.
I was going to say the exact same thing, that this is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This is not a Green Party or Libertarian issue. I mean, this is a right and wrong issue.
Right and wrong.
Period. And, you know, that's the tough thing I can tell you from being in politics for these many years. You see what's right, but then the forces that are out there that don't necessarily see it that way, and the majority of it comes back to two things. And I think that's really based on the discussion we're having right now. It comes down to power and it comes down to turf. Those are the two things. No one wants to give up their power and no one wants to give up their turf. But, I mean, having the discussion, I mean, like, I always relate things back to my kids on the way I see things and then the way that they see things now. And somebody made a comment on here, one flag, bro, if we're counting state flags, then Mississippi still got the Confederate flag and the state flag. They don't. That was what we were just talking about with Kermit Davis. But how do you feel like that the things that we're talking about, how do we talk about that outside of where we are right now? I mean, Facebook's great. We got 96 people who are watching right now, and hopefully 30,000 people will watch. But how do you have this discussion where, I mean, everything you're saying, there's things I've never thought about. But how do we push it past where we are right now?
So all of us have our worlds.
Circles. Yeah.
So in our respective circles, when these types of issues are brought up, I think we're just honest, you know, and hopefully we'll get around in one of these discussions to talk about black on black crime, I hope we get around in some of these discussions to talk about misconceptions about race and about each other.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about that because those are issues as well. And I think we're off to a great start. But there needs to be an understanding of black on black crime. There needs to be an understanding as to why research suggests, and my personal opinion suggests, that more, an inordinate number of black children are born out of wedlock, right? I want to be able to talk through the crime rate in certain neighborhoods, because I think all of that is part of the picture. And to take out one slice of the pie and hold it up as truth without the benefit of the other truth, right, I think it's disingenuous. Right, and so when we talk about race relations, when we talk about what matters, what's historical, how do we move from history and, to a brighter future, I think all of those things need to be discussed. So, but the discussions have to be had. But what politicians know, and people in power know, is that if you can get people to see the benefit of thinking a certain way, of acting a certain way, then you have them, right? If you can, I mean, the Democratic Party has proven that, in certain aspects. The Republican Party has proved. The Dixiecrats proved that, right? That if you can convince Southerners, and unfortunately poor white Southerners, that the little that you have is going to be slowly taken away by the government for the sake of black people, then you begin to attract to your party, to the voting booths, people who aren't going to spend time to think through all the narrative, who not going to spend time to think through the nuances, because just like you said, who wants to give up power? Who wants to give up turf, right? So no one. So I only have a little bit, right? And so when we talk about entitlement, I think we started off our initial conversation by saying, hey, to a white guy who is poor, who is struggling to feed his family, his first thought when someone suggests that he has white privilege is, look at my situation. Do I look like I have privilege? The fact of the matter is he does. But yet he too has been ill affected by the policies and the politics of our leaders for so long. For so long.
You know, I have been studying and went back and looked at, from a political standpoint, going all the way back to the early 90s, really to the mid 80s, about, you know, how law and order has been put into the political specter.
Absolutely.
And then going back to looking at some of the laws that were passed in the 90s, just on mandatory sentencing and mandatory guidelines. So that'd be another good discussion to have at some point. But,
absolutely.
You know, I think from my perspective, I don't think that this can be just a talk that we have, you know, one during. The easy thing to do is not talk about it at all.
Sure.
I mean, that's the easy thing. I mean, it's uncomfortable to sit here as we talk about, you know, the Confederate flag, or we talk about statues and monuments, knowing that you're making people mad, you know, because it's such a divisive issue. But
or happy, Mayor, that you're sharing the truth.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think some people will be mad, but they're mad at ultimately that the information that they're hearing contradicts what they've heard, right? It contradicts what they heard. For the Civil War to be fought, for the Civil War not to have been fought over slavery is ludicrous. For Nathan Bedford Forrest's statue to be on MTSU's Student Union building, the Keekly University Center, where students went and ate and played games and congregated, for that to be on that building, ludicrous.
I remember you're very familiar with that, aren't you?
It's ludicrous. And so to revere, I am for history. I am. I believe in history because history helps us craft a better present and future.
And understanding.
Absolutely. So when we look at the past, we have to look at the past through the eyes, through the lens of truth. And that truth hurts sometimes. It hurts. It's painful, yet at the same time, when you go in that operating room, that surgery is painful. Yet at the same time, your hope is that when you come out of that operating room and when you recover, that you become better, that you are healed from certain things. Nobody's perfect, man.
But here's the thing too, and Alan has said this several times before. Do you want to go into an operating room from 30 years ago, or do you want to go into an operating room from 2020? Which one do you want to pick?
Right.
So history is important, but we continue to learn and we continue to improve.
But history informs our present. It informs it. And so we think the way we think because that's how we've been informed. Right? And until we divorce some of those marriages that we have in our minds, how we've married certain beliefs, certain stereotypes, certain generalizations, certain hatred, certain fallacies, then we'll always be what we've always been. More imperfect than we should be at this point in the life of this nation. I believe in America. That's why I'm engaged like I am, because I'm a patriot. I believe in America. Yet at the same time, it's true that I don't know if you can find any more patriotic people than black people in this country. From Crispus Attucks in 1770 down to all the wars, including the world wars, when black soldiers fought in foreign lands for a freedom for those people when they did not have the freedom in their own land. Yeah. Now, how greater of a patriot can you be that you would risk life and limb somewhere else fighting for the freedom of somewhere else when you were not given or extended those same freedoms at home? You were fighting for an idea and an ideal somewhere else for somebody else on behalf of the country that you're a citizen of, and yet at the same time, that same country was not benevolent enough, was not great enough to extend to you what you were risking your lives over there for those people. So
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. I mean, I could just sit here and not say a word and just listen. And I think that's really what a lot of us have to be able to do, is to be able to listen to others. And this, the thing you've heard before, major on the majors and minor on the minors. And, the major needs to be that we need to understand one another, that we're not going to maybe agree on the minors, but here's what we're working on, and here's how we continue to progress in our community. Let me look at some of these questions. Sure. Pastor, you can answer this, or Doctor. It says, didn't Forrest work at the end of his life to help African Americans get there and keep their rights? I don't know the answer to that.
In one of his biographies. Now, it has been said that Forrest, at the end of his life, as many of us are, he was evolving. Yet he didn't want rights for black people, right? He didn't want them to have full citizenship in this country. Now, on his, we make deathbed confessions, right? We're going to go see the Maker, right? And so we will be held accountable for everything we do in this body. So, yeah, I think he did say that. But he also said what I just said, that he did not want rights, full citizenship rights for black citizens, for black people in this country. And he made a fortune through slavery. At Fort Pillow, massacred, surrendered black soldiers and white soldiers, right? Mm-hmm. And his involvement. And there's so much debate around his being the first Grand Master or Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan or his involvement in it. There's so much, back and forth on it. But what we know is that he fought to continue slavery. That's what we know. So what is that connection? What does that have to do with Middle Tennessee State University? Who decides these things? Those people who decided that wanted to keep that narrative going, wanted to keep this unrealistic vision of what the South was going. So, and wanted to memorialize the lives of those who fought to keep 4 million slaves, 4 million black people as slaves, who gave their lives, many of them for that very cause. And so here's the trip, Mayor, is that some of them were gallant. They were brave and courageous in doing that, right? And so when we think about the rebels, when we think about those Confederate soldiers, many of them poor, white people who bore the brunt of that thinking during that war, when we think about their bravery, man, that's why history is so important. I never want to diminish or discount their bravery in fighting for a cause that, even though it was treason and they acted as a rebellious people, they were brave.
I'm looking to see any others, Pastor. One gentleman says, I fought in the Iraqi war in Afghanistan, and here it is. I have to be afraid of the blue lights behind me. Why fight for peace for a country when the country I'm fighting for is not providing me peace? And, Carrie, first of all, thank you for your service. But I think that's something that, we continually fight to I don't want to say improve, because Murfreesboro, we've been fortunate, but you look at what's happening in the overall country, and I still stand by to say that there's way more good police officers than there are bad police officers. Just when I listened to Representative John DeBerry, who out of Memphis, gave a speech the other day, and 685,000 views as of this morning as I was watching that. And I think there's, just like anything, there's probably some good protesters out there, and there's some that are not good at all. So I think what we have to at some point do, and this is just my opinion, Doc, is that there's got to be some mercy and grace that goes along as we talk about history. That,
absolutely,
every time that I see something that's happened, it's easy to go back to, well, this guy did this a year ago. At some point, we've got to be able to put that down and work forward. And, I see where we are now and some of the things that are happening, and I choose that some of the people that, and some of the things that are happening, I don't even really know that they know what they're protesting about. And that may be inappropriate to say, but I look and I listen and I read these things, and I'm like, that makes no sense whatsoever. But at some point, for us to move forward, and just like what Carrie's saying, I think when the country I'm fighting for is not providing me peace, I think that's what some of us are trying to do right now, is try to get the country working in the right direction.
I think it can be frustrating. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And I think it can be frustrating for the masses of people, no matter their race, no matter their ethnicity, right? No matter their socioeconomic background. It's frustrating because the people are being divided along political lines, right? And you ought to be careful who you vote for, right? Because if you vote for me, if you don't vote for me, there's not going to be peace. If you don't vote for me, there is going to be this continuation of this divisiveness. Someone else says, well, if you don't vote for me, the streets will continue to be overrun with protests.
Well, I say this on WGNS, and we'll have to stop in a minute because
What time is it?
it's almost 7 o'clock already.
Oh, wow.
But, I choose to believe, and this getting on my soapbox, I think some of the political issues that we have as a country right now all have to do with our founding fathers. We were not set up to be career politicians. We weren't. There were farmers and blacksmiths and different people who lived in their communities, and then they went and represented their communities, and they came back home. It was not designed to be the way it is right now. It was not designed to be a full-time job, a career for people. And I'm saying that Republican or Democrats. I mean, you've got people who've served for 30 and 40 years who go into government with very little net worth and come out with a high net worth. That's not what we were set. So what I said on WGNS the other day is I said, if you ask 9 out of 10 people, should there be term limits? I guarantee that 9 out of 10 people would say, absolutely.
But we're looking to the people who don't want term limits to decide whether there are term limits.
And that's the whole point of, as we talk about some of these issues, that the political system won't change as long as there's not new and fresh blood that come in. I mean, you look at our council, you look at the people who've come in that, have not been here forever. And you have to give other people the opportunity to be able to serve. And that's one of the things I think that we have to, this is just my opinion again, that continue to push for, that as you talk about some of the things 20 minutes ago about the people in power who've made these decisions and perpetuated some of those things, it's got to be fresh. You've got to be careful who you vote for.
Sure.
So.
Absolutely.
All right. You gave some good topics to maybe talk about in our next session.
It won't be another month and a half, will it?
No, let's hope not. We've got fall break, though, coming up, not next week, but the next week. Hey, and we talk about things that we want to give shout outs to all the teachers out there. And I was writing some notes to mail out as I was coming in here to different students who've sent letters. Thank y'all for what you're doing. I mean, who would have thought in 2020 that we would be dealing with virtual learning, or that we would be dealing with all of these different things, and still we're able to at least get to some normalcy with kids getting back to learning. And that's just something that I really, as we talk about, this may be another topic, but we have to be very careful that, I read an article the other day that out of the distance learning, there was 30% of the kids who had not even logged in to the to get their classes. Right. And so as we talk about some of the things that you were talking about earlier about, the poorer side, that this pandemic is not perpetuating some of those things that have happened in the past, because people don't have the access that allows them to be able to do those things. So thank you to the teachers who are out there. So yeah, let's plan on maybe 2 weeks. We'll be back here.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, this is
Thank you for
great.
doing this.
No,
I appreciate your time.
I told you this from the very get-go. The most dangerous politician is one who doesn't care if they get elected again or not. I think that we're all put in certain positions for certain reasons, and I think we have to have this discussion, and hopefully it makes people be able to understand. There's things you said tonight that I've never thought about, and so I hope the people who are watching this have that same open mind to be able to, again, this is not a conservative or a liberal issue. This is a human issue that people can open their eyes and open their hearts and listen to different perspectives. So thank you for sharing your perspective.
Thanks again.
All right. City TV 3, thank you for sharing with us tonight and getting this thing set up. And we'll be back in the next couple of weeks. We do have a council meeting tomorrow. We have a workshop. And then we'll be back in a couple of Thursdays. So thank y'all so much.